HCR 2060 passed the Senate after some debate and some changes that were made. It passed along party lines, and what this is going to do, if passed by the House, is allow voters in Arizona to decide whether or not local law enforcement, under certain circumstances, can enforce immigration laws. So that is kind of the crux of what this is. Will the voters see this? Will it pass the House? Joining us now to talk about that is the Speaker of the House, Ben Toma. Mr. Speaker, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you for the invite. Appreciate it.
Do you believe you have the votes in the House to pass this?
I do. You know, the HCR 2060, as you may remember, a lot's been said lately about it, but it started as my bill, and it started specifically focused on the benefits and the E-Verify side of things, and we passed it out of the House. Then it got to the Senate, and, you know, it sat there for a little while. We were trying to figure out what to do, and I've been working on it in the background, of course, trying to make sure that we do something about this very important issue. Because let's be honest here, we're having this conversation because the feds have neglected to do their job, and now even Democrats are talking about the fact that we have to do something about this. But anyway, so the Senate finally made some changes. I know it's been covered on the station a lot since I've heard it at different times. But I can tell you that some of what has been said has not been correct. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on and hopefully talk through some of this and set the record straight.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those changes, if you don't mind. Let's talk about what's in it. What will the voters see? What will this do if they pass it? In a nutshell, what will happen and what will change?
Well, so there's really three parts to the bill at this point, to the resolution that will be on the ballot. The two that are not talked about much, I think, are actually very important because they actually become effective right away. The first is the fentanyl piece, which is enhanced sentencing for anyone that actually sells lethal fentanyl and causes the death of another person. And it's a Class 2 felony plus a 5-year enhancement. So it's really designed to target fentanyl smuggled across the border, and that's exactly what it's doing. The second is anyone that knowingly submits any sort of false information or documents to an employer to get around the E-Verify system. And that's at first a Class 1 misdemeanor and then a Class 6 felony for subsequent offenses. And the same thing applies to anyone that's knowingly applying for any sort of public benefit or they submit any sort of false document to get public benefits. And that's very similar, by the way, to what the crimes of welfare fraud and maybe to get, medical or health coverage. So those become effective right away. The part that's gotten a lot of the attention is the so-called Texas legislation. It's modeled on that, which actually is a border security piece. It's not really specific to immigration. And the reason that's important is, and it's very different than 1070. I know that's been brought up over and over again. But the difference between this bill and 1070 is that this requires not just reasonable suspicion, which was, of course, the standard in 1070, but it actually requires probable cause. And the definition and the distinction between the two is very important. So what is probable cause? Well, really, the bill only gives two examples of it, which is one, an officer actually physically witnesses the illegal crossing, or two, it's some sort of technological recording of the violation that, of course, you see someone on video or something like that, or trail cam or something of the sort. And that's really the only two. Now, it does talk about other constitutionally sufficient indicta of probable cause, which has been made much of, but the only two actual examples in the bill are the first two. So it is very limited in that sense, but it's really about border security because it's about someone witnessing or being able to prove that someone entered this country illegally from Mexico, because that's the only national border that we border, obviously. And so it's pretty limited in that sense, but it would be limited to anybody that has jurisdiction on the border.
Do you think, with the changes that were made in the Senate, are there concerns from some of the Republican caucus in the House on its passage? Was there debate behind the scenes? Have you had conversations about this? And if so, what were the concerns?
Well, many of the concerns, to be perfectly honest with you, are just misunderstandings of what the bill actually does. Again, let's be direct here. There's a lot of I don't know what the word is, but there's just a lot. 1070 is still sort of the ghost that hovers above this. And the fact that was the show me your papers. And again, the reason for that was just reasonable suspicion, which is, again, a very different standard than this one. So really, it's just the ghost of 1070 past, I guess, that has caused a lot of concern among some members and frankly, some members of the business community and other friends out there that don't understand what this bill actually is. Now, I will point out, just because I can't not point out, that, again, we're having this conversation because the feds and the Biden administration and the Democrats have chosen not to do their job. And at this point, we have, as a matter of fact, just yesterday, last night, let me talk about this. I met with one of the, you go through a lot of events when you're doing what I'm doing, and I met with the doctor that works for Community Bridges, and he mentioned that 5 people just at Community Bridges yesterday died from accidental fentanyl overdoses. So, we have to do something on this front. I admit that we are limited in what we can do, and that's why this even the Texas piece, I didn't mention this, but you have mentioned it on the show before, is conditional on the current status of that case in Texas and the appeals courts and presumably finally in the Supreme Court. So. Yes, that's one important part of it. That's the one that's getting all the attention. But the other parts are just as important on a day-to-day basis. We have to deal with the incentives that people unfortunately use to get here. And this is, again, to me, this seems really reasonable. And once our members understand that, I got to be honest with you, they've been pretty comfortable. My experience has been that I think we're going to have the votes and we're going to get it done. And quite frankly, I'm surprised that the Democrats aren't voting for this, because Hobbs herself mentioned border security in the state of the state, but then hasn't done anything at all of any kind, to my knowledge, to try to actually do something about the problem.
The Speaker of the House in the Arizona State Legislature, Ben Toma, is joining us. So let me ask you one last question. If this is confusing to your members in this, how are you going to be able to ensure that it will be on the ballot in a way that's understandable for the voters and exactly what they're approving if they approve this in language that they can understand in that short time they may be in the voting booth that they're filling out their ballots?
Well, part of it is having conversations like this in public, on the air, and just making sure that everybody actually knows what this is. A lot has been said about it, and I don't mean to impugn anyone or be accusatory in any way, but I will say that much of what I've heard has been, quite frankly, wrong. And so I think members need to go out there and defend themselves and vote their conscience on this bill. To me, it comes down to we're either a nation of laws or we're not. And if we do agree that law enforcement is important and that we need to enforce the laws we have, primarily because I think there's a humanitarian crisis going on the border too, not just the fentanyl and the human trafficking, sex trafficking, and so on, but actually the fact that we're creating a humanitarian crisis by inviting a bunch of people here effectively with our open border policy that then we can't take care of. Now we're sending them all over the country, which, okay, I mean, at some level, I think that Chicago and New York and other liberal cities deserve it. But that aside, this is unconscionable, the fact that we're continuing to do this. So we have to actually address the problem. The only way that people will know what they're actually voting on is if we're being honest about what the bill actually contains and what the actual effect will be. And this is pretty limited and pretty commonsensical at the end of the day. So I think people will realize, hey, an officer witnesses something illegal, they should be able to arrest that person. It's really that simple at the end of the day when it comes to that Texas provision. And the other two speak for themselves.
Mr. Speaker, I always appreciate the time on this issue, and I'm sure it's not the last time we'll be talking about this between now and when it gets on the ballot, which I believe it will, and get more clarification once we see the text of how it's on the ballot. So thanks for your time this morning, and I hope you have a great weekend.
I appreciate it. Same to you, sir.
All right, thanks. That is Ben Toma. He is the Arizona Speaker of the House.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch the first season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.